Now it's time to format the search form. Unlike the other widgets, WordPress makes it easy to apply styles and formatting to the search form. You may be wondering why. The search form is a more unique widget than the other default WordPress widgets. The default WordPress widgets just provide links to other parts of your site. However, search forms are more complex and vary from site to site when it comes to design. Search forms can also appear in various parts of your site. This makes it a reusable component. With that said, WordPress recognizes that the search form should be stylized by the theme and not WordPress itself. If you don't have any styles or formats available, then WordPress automatically generates the HTML for the search widget. So how does WordPress know if we have a search form template? It's simple. We just need to create a template called searchform.php. Let's create this file now. Inside this template, add the following HTML. You can find the text inside the /assets/extra/searchform.txt file. It will contain all the HTML and PHP code you'll need. Alright, let's go over what's in this HTML one by one. The very first thing we do is generate a unique ID for the input fields. This isn't required, but it's good practice. The unique ID function helps us generate a unique ID. We can pass in a string to prepend to the ID. Then we use the escape attribute function, which will make sure the string is safe for use inside an attribute. WordPress provides a set of functions for making sure your data is safe for output. One of these is called the escape attribute function. This will make sure the value can be used inside an HTML attribute. I'll talk more about the various sanitation functions in a future lecture. For now, let's keep moving forward. Even though creating an ID isn't required, I consider it an important step. Templates are reusable. The search form template is no exception to this. This template can be used multiple times throughout any other template. Since there is a possibility of having multiple search form templates, then we want to make sure the input has a unique ID each time. This makes it easier to differentiate between forms. Let's look at the rest of this HTML. First, we need a form tag. We must set the class, method, and action attributes. The class should be set to search-form. This allows for any plugins to add any JavaScript into this form if needed. You can also add additional classes if you want to. The method should always be set to get, as that's what's recommended by WordPress. The action attribute should be the URL to the homepage. I'm introducing a new function here called home URL. This is a function provided by WordPress. We simply pass in a / to instruct it we just want the root home URL. We're also using the escape URL function to make sure that the URL returned is safe and is just a URL. Like the other functions, this function is defined and provided by WordPress. You do not need to do anything to make sure it's available to you. Next, we have to set up the input tag. The name should always be S. WordPress uses this name for something called the loop. The loop is something we'll go over in a future lecture. For now, just know you should always set the name attribute to S. Next, the field's value will be set to the value returned by the search query function. This function simply outputs the search query the user inputted. If there is no search query, it'll just output an empty string. So you may be wondering where I'm getting all this info. Well, there's a function called getSearchForm which will look for a file named searchform.php and then output it. Otherwise, this function will generate some default HTML for you. This function is used from within the search widget. In the resource section, I provide a link to learn more about this function. You'll notice that we're in the developer site of WordPress. Something I absolutely love about this side of WordPress is that if you were to search for a function and scroll down, you'll find a section called Source. This part of the page will actually show you the source code in WordPress. Let's examine the source code. A lot of this is mostly unimportant to us for the time being. Further down, you'll find a part of the code that generates HTML. There are two versions. One version is for HTML5 and another is for XHTML. Currently, our theme is meant for modern sites, and so we're using the HTML5 version. What I did was started with this form as a base. Then I modified it a bit to match the design of my theme. You are allowed to do the same if you wish. There are only 4 important things we need to set, and that is the method, action, the input's name, and the current search value. You do not need to have every class or HTML as the one WordPress generates. The point of making your own template is to customize it to your needs. Besides the 4 things I pointed out earlier, everything else is completely up to you. That's it. Let's refresh the page and see if the form is formatted correctly. This looks so much better because it fits with the rest of the theme. We haven't created a search template yet, so we can't actually see the results generated by the search. We'll be doing that in a future lecture. One last thing I want to note is that inside the form, we're using a function called _e, which is similar to the double underscore function. The difference between these two functions is that the _e function will echo out the translated string rather than returning it. That covers how to create a search form template. Keep in mind that creating this template is completely optional. You can just let WordPress handle it, and that would be just fine. Alright, I'll see you in the next lecture.